Hello, got a special interview with the author, the writer, and co-star, and the director of The Reconciler. So, Shawn Justice and Scott, your last, what is your last? Galbraith.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. So, for in case anyone hasn't watched my review or is not familiar with the movie, can one of you give us just a really quick summary of what the premise of the Reconciler is?
Shawn, I'll let you take that because my summaries never end up short.
Yeah, it's a bit of a suspense mystery film about someone who captures or takes people that are not talking to each other, that are estranged, and puts them together in the hopes that they will reconcile. This person seems to know, a bit about them. And so it's kind of the drama of these three or four different groups. And then there's a whole subplot that we brought in of a woman on a journey for truth.
Oh, great. And so I understand, Scott, this started as a play. Is that right?
Yeah, a church play. And the original church play was much shorter because church dramas tend to be shorter. I don't know why that is. Maybe church people have less of an attention span. I'm not sure. But it was only, and to be honest, of all the plays that I had written myself that I had performed for my church, I can honestly say it wasn't one of my favorites. It was kind of a filler. It was kind of I didn't really fine tune it. I just kind of threw it together and did the performance. And as Shawn mentioned, the reporter storyline was not in my original script. The original script was me and the two people I'm trapped with. I did play Ed in the original play. Me and the two people I'm trapped with, and then the two subplots that Ed tells the story of flashbacking to the cops and the soldier and his son. But we stretched that as far as we could. I wrote a draft, and then Shawn finessed my dialogue, which he does such a wonderful job of. And the most we could get it to was 62 pages. That's an hour and 2-minute movie. That's not feature length. So Shawn said, Scott, what I love about Shawn is that anytime he adapts a story that I've written, he always asks my permission every step of the way. Is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I do this? What do you think about me adding this? And he'll let me contribute along the way as well. And the best he could come up with a week before we were about to film, mind you, was this storyline about adding this, because we racked our brains and we could not think of a fourth reconciler scenario. And we thought it would be overkill. And also all the reconciler scenarios are all very claustrophobic. You know what I mean? They're all people trapped in a place. So the idea, he said, let's come up with, what if I came up with something that's not that? And I was like, I'm not going to get a chance to have one of my stories I wrote on screen every day. Do whatever you want with it if it's the difference between the movie getting made and not. And he came up with the Laurie storyline, and I contributed here and there, but he wrote most of the Laurie storyline himself.
Great. Yeah. And that's one of the things I noted that I thought was really smart, that you did have separate stories instead of trying to just focus on one story. Because I do agree that would have been a lot to stretch it out that long. So let's back up. How did you two meet? How did you two get together?
Through a mutual Facebook friend, actually. I had written a play that I was kind of more in love with than The Reconciler, called The Twin Master. Prior to meeting Shawn, I think I wanted to make it into a movie for the longest time, but knocked on every Christian production door. No one would call me back. No one. I didn't really understand how the industry worked back then. I was of the mindset of you could write a script, send it to a production company, they'd love it, and you had it made. And I had no idea that that's not how it worked. So along the way, a guy named Barry Bowen, who was working for Dave Christiano at the time, who's considered one of the pioneers of Christian film, he said, hey, Scott, I know this guy from Washington State. He's a Christian, he's a filmmaker, and he's a twin. He might like the movie The Twin Master. And he watched the DVD of my play, because one of the reasons why I like to do plays first is no one will look at an unsolicited script. But if you've already done a play for the public, then it's already out there. There's absolutely no reason you can't watch that. So that was one of the reasons why I did the play, so that I could give people a proof of concept, if nothing else. Of course, it would also confuse people I would send companies the DVD of the play, and they're like, "We don't usually distribute videos of plays." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to tell you, I think this would make a good movie." Well, Shawn got it, and then some. And that was the very first time I let him rewrite my script. And believe it or not, I had some people saying, "Are you crazy letting somebody you only know on the phone rewrite your script?" And I'm like, "Well, you got to take a leap of faith somewhere." And when I remember he sent me the Christmas after we met, he sent me a rewrite of my play, and it was 10 times better. It was every change he made was an improvement. So, and we tried and failed at making that script for a while, and then something changed the course of things that happened in July of 2012, which I'll let Shawn tell you about because it's not my story to tell.
Yeah, we did. What is that? 2008 when we originally started talking, or so?
I think it was actually 2009 because I did the play for my church in the summer of 2008, but I didn't meet you until the play was about a year old.
Right. So that's going
And
back
that's Twin
a
Master, not
little far back.
Twin Master, not Reconcile.
Yeah, and we did. I had shot my first. Just a little bit of background on myself. I had my own film and video production company since 1989 when I started it in college when I was 19 years old, and had been doing mostly corporate film and video projects, and always wanted to tell narrative stories as well. Just that the bread and butter is, in clients who pay. So
Yeah.
we ended up, I don't know, the dot-com boom happened in the late 90s. I had a lot of money put away, and I thought, well, okay, let's make a movie. And I'd been working on a script since the mid 90s, a teen film, kind of a homage to the old ABC after school specials. And
I
made
was
that,
looking
got
at your
it distributed.
IMDb.
What's
Is
that?
that Stripper Land? Do we want to get?
No. That was Going the Distance.
Okay.
Going the
Yeah,
Distance.
so I want to talk about Stripper Land, but I know that so
Yeah, no,
Not sure
that
Shawn
was
will talk about Stripperland.
yeah.
Well,
That's funny
those
you
are
turn.
so in about 2006. I got out of the blue. I heard from an old high school friend of mine who went to performing arts school that I did, and he was doing his own. He loved the horror genre and all that. And I told him about another script that I'd written called Crawdaddy that was a creature feature, and he was like, "Hey, we got to get together and maybe we can do something." So the Stripperland and the other one were his films, and I helped out on those but I personally would have never made them myself. But I served where I could, and I was the unit production manager, so I ran the sets and did a very good job at that because I knew production, so that he could direct and do what he wanted. I helped a little bit with the scripts, just technically, finessing them and getting them better. But when it came to 2012, we had our two sons go to a camp. And the second day the second day there on a Monday, our second son drowned due to a waterfall situation where a leader took him back there and they both perished. And
wow.
it was tough, but because of our faith and stuff, and he was fully walking in his own path of faith too, that we're very proud of him in that, and kind of choosing for his own to walk that.
How old was he? Not that it matters.
He was 15.
The tragedy.
He was 15,
yeah,
Caleb.
wow, yeah.
No, and we love talking about Caleb, and
Yeah.
it helps preserve his memory, of course. So for us, we're very, we have no regrets as parents of where he was at in his life, and feel, I guess you could say, blessed that we had 15 years with him, because he was a unique kid, and as all parents, you get frustrated sometimes with your kids, but he was brilliant. And so what came out of that whole situation is we pursued the wrongful death insurance money that was available through the camps. and those who are running the camps. And we wanted to do two things with those funds. We wanted to preserve his memory within our family and invest in projects that were really his heart. And so we ended up, I hadn't made a movie in 14 years at that point when that came about, that settlement. And I didn't want to do anything. I had a bunch of library of scripts that I had written, probably a dozen or more. And I thought, well, we could do Twin Master, but that's, a little complicated. It's multiple production days. And I just want to get my feet wet again. And Scott had sent me his play, and I was like, we could shoot this. It's only in a few locations. It's going the distance. My first one was, I think, a 23-day schedule. So, we figured when I was looking at the script and did the breakdown, I could shoot it in 11 days. And that's what we ended up doing, even with the added scenes. And I had also purchased a red camera, a digital cinema camera before, with actually I did a government project and got paid very well on that. And I'm like, all right, let's get this red camera, and hey, maybe some narrative stuff will come up. That happened in late 2011, early 2012. So, we had the elements. I had some capital to invest into bringing on a crew and paying for food and all the things that go into making a movie. And we did. We shot The Reconciler in 11 days. So
Wow.
It was cool. It was very aggressive. The first 3 days we shot 12 pages a day, which
wow.
That's thanks to Scott and the twins, who we actually did Zoom calls with before. I think probably 3 or 4 rehearsals over Zoom. So and so they knew their lines, and we could just go, and it was all in that basement room. So it was pretty cool. We shot 36 pages in 3 days and then just moved on from there. But
it's actually worth mentioning that I had known the Steele brothers for a while at that point, and they actually did the stage play version of Twin Master.
Okay.
And they were attached to play the characters if we had greenlit the film. The problem was, without going too much into what Twin Master is about, the characters we wanted them to play were supposed to be seniors in high school, and they were starting to age out. And we were kind of seeing the writing on the wall that we were going to not get the film greenlit before they aged out the parts. So in the original script, in my original Reconciler play, Ed is actually trapped with a mother and a daughter, a grown mother and a daughter. He wakes up with the grown daughter, and her mom is in the trunk. And so the original thought is that we would look for actresses who I had good chemistry with. And I said to Shawn, I'm in Boston, you're in Washington State. Do we really have the capacity to do that on the budget we're working with? Why don't we sort of keep our promise to Jeremy and Jordan, since we're pretty sure we're not going to use them for Twin Master, and change the characters to twins, because we know that the three of us can work well together. So that's an example of something you do when you have a low budget. It's easier to write the script around what you have rather than to do stuff like hold an open casting call and hope you find who you're looking for.
Yeah, that's great, because I was definitely wondering about the twins, if that was on purpose. You mentioned the earlier idea, so that makes perfect sense. So that's a great idea. And you also talked a little bit about, Shawn, with your history and stuff, because I'm always curious about the making of them. How do you get started and things like that? And I was going to ask about, how to do film with the red camera. So you did a great job of anticipating all my questions. What about let's talk about, you talked about the cast in 11 days. So how did Roddy Piper get involved?
I was talking about the other producer that had done the Stripper Land and that, and it was basically, he then owed me, and so he was my UPM producer on that. But he ended up working on with he loved wrestling, and as you may or may not know, Portland is fairly well known for amateur wrestling, and that's where Roddy grew up, I believe. Anyway, or maybe not. Anyway, he
definitely where he lived.
It's where he lived more recently, per se, and so he was involved in the Portland wrestling, I believe. sport and entertainment, and then went on to the big leagues from there. But so he lived in the Portland area, and when this idea for a pilot came up for him helping a new wrestling group to kind of manage it, I guess. He called on he and my co-producing partner had a relationship, and so when my partner needed a crew, he asked me because he knew my experience level and doing stuff for broadcast as well, Food Channel and such, National Geographic Television I've worked on projects for. So he knew he could trust me to bring me in to do a professional job. In the meeting, we actually sat down with Roddy, and he somehow connected with me, and he goes, I want you to be my personal cameraman through this pilot. And
wow.
he and I spent a lot of time together. And I think part of it too, I think that was just in 2012-ish, 2013. And it was right when Caleb had passed, and he had a son around the same age. And so I think there was some bonding there that happened. And I remember he came up to me, and he put his hand like right on my face, and he gets real close to me. I'm like, oh boy, Roddy Piper. Yeah, I'm like, okay. So, but he's just like, I'm so sorry, Shawn, for Caleb's passing. And he was just so sincere. And his persona, being the villain or the bad guy, is just that. In real life, he's a big teddy bear and just a stellar guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. He just, he loved me. I loved him. It was just so, it was a neat experience. So when it came time to do the movie, I wrote in a part, it was like, hey, Roddy, would you come in? And negotiated a fee, 1-day fee for him. And then he proceeded to kind of do the lines how he wanted to do them. And
well, wrestlers have a lot of improv experience, right? So.
Right. But we had a lot of fun. It was our last day of shooting, the 11th day.
Yeah.
So it was a joy. It was a lot of fun to have him on set and engage with him and direct him in that way.
The 11th day instead of the 11th hour. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Which I actually wasn't there for. As much as I am proud of Reconciler, I got to tell you, the only thing that I kind of have a little bit of a somber regret thing about is that the movie exists because Shawn's son Caleb passed away. In fact, we can't confirm this, but we think that Caleb might be the world's first posthumous executive producer. He's credited as the executive producer of the film. And then we actually got some attention because we were Roddy Piper's last movie. I never met Caleb or Roddy. Shawn and I had not met in person when Caleb passed away. And I was only on the set of Reconciler for 7 of the 11 days because I had to go back to Boston and resume my career as a magician. Well, I had a show I had to get back there for, and they didn't need me for shooting the Laurie scenes. So 2 people who were big parts of this that I never met, and then they passed away. I never got to. So that's one thing that's just a little somber about the movie for me, is the fact that I never met Justice and Roddy Piper.
Yeah, that's got to be an unusual situation to have these things happen, sort of connected to you, but not at firsthand. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, because I've noticed looking at IMDb that Shawn, your subsequent movies, you've done a really good job of getting like at least one actor that we've heard of. So I'm looking at the IMDb page of Out of the Darkness and Graham Greene, who the name may not recognize, but you see his face and you're like, oh, it's that guy. He's been in tons of movies and stuff. And so
yeah.
I'm assuming that comes from your work, your experience in making these films in the industry and behind the camera, other things.
Yeah. I mean, you make connections, of course, over time. One of the connections we made was with a casting guy in LA who's also now passed away. But he was the one who negotiating and got us Graham Greene. I know for that role, we were always looking for someone. I think I can't remember what other actors that we were talking to. at the
I remember
time.
you had said you were looking at Danny Glover for that part at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it has a lot. Yeah, exactly. So we had several, and he's the one who came about, and that has a whole nother story to it with Graham. He had just injured himself. He had really injured his tailbone, and he couldn't walk around very well without a lot of pain. And so we were it's like, okay, what do we do? And there was walking in the script, and so we ended up having to sit him down most of the time. And so, you run into a lot of those kinds of things that just happen in low budget filmmaking, where you gotta, they're compromises, but you got to make them work, right?
Yeah.
So
And that's one of the things I love as a fan of films, that seeing that how people just make the best of the situation, and how they turn the limitations into opportunities. And I think that's great.
you have to. And the joke is that you don't just have plan A or plan B, you have plan Z and then double A back, that you got to be very flexible, and because you got to keep things moving forward. Because as they say, daylight's a burning.
Yeah.
Of course, when we did Stripperland, it was pretty much all night shoots, which
Okay.
that was excruciating. I don't, unless you're really a night person, I would not recommend it. And I have another film that we're potentially going to be doing later this year for another friend of mine that he's bringing me on as a producer, and a lot of it's night shoots. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, kind of the elephant in the room. I assume this was a Saw ripoff. Other reviewers have, and Scott, you say that you did not. It's not based on Saw. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I had actually Saw did exist when I started writing the script, but I hadn't seen it. The truth is, if anybody thought it was going to be a ripoff of something, I thought they'd accuse it of being a ripoff of Cube. If you've ever seen that movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there are similarities there too. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you, I have this rule: if more than one movie has done it, it's fair game. You know what I mean? Okay, but it's just I'm not going to name names, but there have been Christian films that admit that they're doing the Christian version of something else. If you want to look at our movie as the Christian Saw, then that is perfectly fine. But just know we did it by accident. Okay, we did not mean to rip off Saw. The one thing I've explained in some of the other follow-up interviews we've done is that, believe it or not, the inspiration actually came from two completely separate episodes of Perfect Strangers. Which was I assume you know that show.
Yes.
Okay. Season 3, there's an episode where Larry is giving Balky the silent treatment because he loaned Jennifer his car without asking him. It's called The Defiant Guys, and Balky handcuffs himself to Larry and says, "They don't come off until you talk to me."
Yeah.
After they do make up, he goes to unlock it, he breaks the key, and the rest of the episode handcuffed together, and the normal stuff ensues. Now, I did not see this episode in first run. I saw it in syndication on a secondary channel when it was on every week. And that just happened to air at the same time the 5th season was going on, the first time I saw it. And in the same week, I saw an episode from season 5 where Larry and Balky's girlfriends, Jennifer and Marianne, who were roommates, were in a fight, and one of them moved in with them, and she was driving Larry and Balky crazy. And they're like, "We got to have these two make up." So at the end of the episode, they orchestrate a plan to get everybody in the apartment, lock the door, and throw the key out the window.
Oh,
And
I think I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually not a new concept. There have been other TV show examples of this. Recently, an example would be an episode of Cobra Kai where Johnny locks the door to get his son and stepson to. You could name a whole. I'm sure there's others as well. And people, William Zabka and Ralph Macchio from Cobra Kai have even said they get countless people who meet them at the Comic-Cons and stuff say, I just want to lock you and Johnny or you and Daniel together until you guys work in a room together until you work this out. So the expression of "I'm going to lock you two in a room until you work this out" is a old concept. So I thought, what if you did a movie or a show about a guy who made that his life mission? He found people who were being petty and stupid for dumb reasons and locking up. One thing that Shawn and I have repeatedly said is we didn't lock up. If you notice the movie, all the reasons people have said, wow, these people are being locked up for minuscule things. Well, that's kind of the point. It's kind of the reconciler picks people who are being extra dumb, who are holding on to grudges for stupid reasons. He's not going to lock two people together for an issue that's going to take a lot of healing or a lot of talking out. Like, he's not going to put the perpetrator of a crime and the victim of a crime together. And he's also not going to put together, because you know the ending. I want to thank you, by the way, for being one of the few people who did not spoil the ending in your review.
Yeah, because
You know,
hopefully
I
my
look at those
idea is
reviews
people
and I
watch
say,
the movie, so
yeah. Some of the other people who have done reviews, I'm like, you want to criticize our movie, fine.
yeah.
But at least, come on, what's with the spoiling the ending? Thanks a lot.
I try really hard not to do that.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
so I mean, if you know the ending of the film,
Yeah.
and you know who the reconciler is, well, that person knows enough about the people that he locks up that he knows whether or not they have forgiveness in them. He knows whether or not there's going to, in some ways, saying, and you also have to remember, the reconciler's notes and tape recorder never say, I'm going to leave you in here till you die. He never says that. Somehow people have gotten that impression that's the concept, but he never says, make up or I'm going to let you die.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them assume that. One of the cops says, whoever did this to us is going to let us starve to death unless we don't do it. Well, they'd only been there the line got cut, but on my original play, it's mentioned that the cops were only in the car for like 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not, it's people, but you would be surprised. I mean, even the episode of Perfect Strangers that I mentioned, when they first throw the keys out the window and they say, okay, now no one is leaving here until you two settle this mess. Very first thing one of the girls says is, okay, well, you didn't cut the phone. I'm calling a locksmith to get out of here. She'd rather, you know how much locksmiths cost? She would rather pay for a locksmith than work out the petty disagreement with her friend. That's how petty some people are.
Yeah.
So in essence, the reconciler looks for people who are like, okay, if you're going to be this dumb, I'm going to show you how dumb you're being.
Well, I think too, I'll say that, when we started hearing people saying, oh, this is like the Christian Saw, as a low budget filmmaker, you're going to go, huh, okay. Yeah, we'll go with that because then there's a lot, no bad. What is that? There's no such thing as bad press per se.
Right.
So if we can get people watching it, and I think as people of faith, as Christians, we have a certain element of wanting to see healing done, wanting to see reconciliation, and try not to develop strife. And so for us, if we can have people be affected by what they see and watch and go, in fact, we have. I've had people comment and go, after I watched this, I called my dad, I haven't talked to in 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not that it's a message film or we're trying to preach or anything, but if we can just show through example, of course, to get people thinking. And a lot more films do this than Christian films or faith-based films. Unfortunately, I think a lot of them are a little too heavy and tried too hard. They think it's the most important thing.
And I wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's one thing I really liked was because whether you're a person of faith or not, I think we can all agree with the message. It's good to reconcile with people, especially among about little things. And that's one of the things I really liked is I was trying to think of earlier today how to phrase it. The film is more about inspiration than it is like proselytizing.
Yes.
Right. And so,
yes.
because that seems to be one of the failures of Christian movies.
Yeah.
So many of them, they are so heavy-handed. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many Christian movies fall into that being? Because I mentioned in my review, a lot of the ones they treat non-believers like they're just idiots, and it's like if only they knew about Christianity, they would totally. And it's like that's not enough. Right? That's not what's happening.
To let you know, you hit the nail right on the head. I've been a Christian since I was 13. I believe in the Bible. And I am sick to death of the John 3:16 speech being in movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I say to all those filmmakers, congratulations, you're making a Christian sick of hearing the gospel mentioned, because everybody does it in every single film. And you even said something in your review, which I thought was great. This movie is not accept Jesus and everything is wonderful. And to be honest with you, I have never been a fan of films like that. If, as a matter of fact, if you would like to see a faith-based show that is not that at all, I highly recommend a show produced by a friend of ours named Vindication. It's a Christian cop show. Yes, you heard right, a Christian cop show. And one of the best, you can see it on Amazon, you can see it on Pureflix. And one of the best things about it is it's not always happy endings. It's not always happy. There's an episode where the main cop has to arrest the dad for beating up his son. There's an episode where the main cop has got to fire 2 policemen because they weren't doing their job properly, and then 2 other cops walk out, and he was already understaffed in the first place, and now he did the right thing, but it wasn't easy. You know what I mean? And it just goes to show. I did a post just recently where I said the worst thing Walt Disney ever did was put the phrase "happily ever after" out there, because there's no such thing.
Right.
There's no such thing. Life is like the one thing that there are some Christian films that are great, but you have to remember they're movies. And one thing, when you're talking about, one of the things that I also can't get over in some of the people that have critiqued our film is that, like, okay, so this is a movie about God kidnapping people. I don't want anything to do with a God. This is a movie. This is a movie. This is a illustration. We don't believe I mean, as far as I know, God is not actually doing this. You know what I mean? But we're doing it to make a point here. You know what I mean? Where it's not about. And I also believe that one of the things that a lot of Christian movies lack is I will watch a Christian film and I will say, wow, the message in that was really good. In fact, the writer was so focused on the message, he forgot to tell a story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He forgot to be, we have imaginations. God gave us imaginations. People should use them. You know what I mean? And I think that, I'm happy with a lot of the Christian films that are popular right now, whether it be the series The Chosen or the film The Jesus Revolution. But I was talking to Jared, who makes Vindication, and we figured out a lot of the stuff that in the Christian media world that people are taking chances on these days are either based on Bible stories or they're based on true stories. There's very few original. No one is willing to, because no one, just like the mainstream, everybody doesn't want to take a chance on something that's not a sure thing.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I like Vindication is because, it's original material. What a concept. You know what I mean? And I was trying to do, that's one of the things that I said I want to do with Shawn. I'm a man of God, but I'm a man. I like suspenseful movies. Let's make a suspenseful movie. Well, I'm a magician. I like surprise endings. Let's do a twist ending.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a filmmaker, I think, and talking to a lot of people that are making these films, and being a professional in the industry, I think people get passionate about the message and they forego the story, like Scott said. They don't take into full effect. And I think part of it too, there's a lot of, so when I started out, my company in '89, cameras were very expensive, and to shoot a film, you were shooting on film, and it's $400. I bought them before. $400 for a roll of 10 minutes of 35 millimeter film, just for the film. Then it costs another $150 to develop that. And that's not even something you can project. That's actually a negative. Then you have to have a positive. It was very cost prohibitive for people to make films. But with the digital age, it I don't say democratized it, or it leveled it out to where a lot of people who weren't film professionals but felt like they had a story to tell, could get out there and make a film. And so I think and the funny thing is, it's not unique to just the faith market. You had this huge expansion of really bad indie films overall. You just don't hear about them.
Yeah.
And Christians have essentially kind of a built-in market per se that they can market to in churches. Indie films don't necessarily have that, unless you're making maybe a horror film or really bad horror film. And so I think the technology degraded, I think, storytelling to a certain degree of the product that was coming out. And I don't mean to criticize people. It just, everybody and their brother thought you know what, I want to make a movie, and I can now. You know, and I think that's where you saw a lot of challenges and problems with the quality, and people not studying story. They just thought, well, how hard could it be to make a movie? You know, let's get out there and do it. So
there are Christian movies being shot on iPhones these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
So and I think the other challenge too, and I don't want to get too far into it, is that there's always the comparison to $100 million feature films or whatever, where you have 4 months to shoot a film, right? You know, we had 11 days with Reconciler. If we had 4 months to shoot that, it would have been a very different film, and I think the quality would have gone up. We would have had better actors that we could have paid. Forgive me, Scott. So no,
it's okay.
So
look, I was the one. You want to know what's one of the biggest things I took away from this? I was never given a leading role in high school. I was always made the funny character actor, and I was always like, I want to play the lead. I want to play. So when I had this opportunity, so I would always cast myself as the lead in my own plays, and I was like, Shawn, can I please play the thing? And after I watched The Reconciler, I was like, my drama teacher was right. I'm not a leading man. So now I want to do supporting roles, and I want to leave the leading roles to the stars and such. And I think my very first scene in the movie is the one movie that I still roll my eyes at my own performance, because I was laying on that floor for a good solid 3 hours and had not gotten much sleep the night before. Shawn's co-producer, who he's mentioned several times, when I booked the flights for me and the Steele brothers to come from California and Boston, we were told that we were going to get in, have 1 day to rehearse, and then 4 days to shoot. And then after I buy the tickets, he rearranges the whole schedule so that we're going to shoot everything the first 3 days. So we were literally in at 10 o'clock at night, up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I did fall asleep on the floor while we were shooting. And even though I had done the play, movies are a different animal. And I found myself having to, like when Jordan is setting up the crate and I'm going, careful, son. I'm like, oh, look at that big hand. Will you get that out of the shot, please? You know, hand acting is something that I have done, but I got huge hands, which is why I'm such a good magician. So the very first scene, my acting, I think, is a little flat. And so anybody who has said that, and the truth is, my character doesn't have much character development. My character is basically the MC or the narrator, which we needed. Which, when you think about it, is a good role for the writer to play. You know, one thing I pointed out in one of our other interviews is, for all the comparisons our movie has been made to Saw, one thing that nobody has ever caught on about the fact is that both Saw and Reconciler have one of the film's writers playing one of the lead parts.
Yes, that is. Now you think about that, that's true. That's a good point.
I mean, the guy in the bathtub couldn't stay out of his own movie either.
So let's talk about the future then. What do you two have together? Are you going to be working together in the future? Are you doing your own projects? I see IMDb has a couple things upcoming, but what are we working on now?
Well, we both have our own individual things, but there is one collaboration thing that we are definitely working on. During the pandemic, Bob Shepard, who played Detective Tilton, the older cop in Reconciler, he stayed in contact with us. I didn't share any screen time with him, but I did meet him. We became good friends. He became good friends with Shawn. And he was adamant about the fact that he wanted to work with either or both of us again. And I had tried to greenlight this film based on the first 4 chapters of Genesis, where I wanted him to play the role of God, and I was going to play the role of Satan myself. And it would have been a bigger budget. Shawn didn't really want to do it because he didn't want to do a Bible story, which I can't blame him for. But then the pandemic hit and everything was put on hold. And I remembered a skit that I had written that had never performed at my church, which I will admit was inspired by a scene from a movie. Everybody considers the conversation between De Niro and Pacino in the movie Heat one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever. And it's been duplicated in other movies, whether it's been, Professor X and Magneto talking, or Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty talking. The whole villain and hero have a game of verbal tennis while just sitting at a table rather than punching at each other. I always thought has been a interesting concept. And at just one point I said, why has nobody ever done that with God and the devil? So I thought, to myself, okay, we were talking about doing a crowd fund before the pandemic, and we never got to it. So let's see if we can do a small crowd fund and maybe make a short film based on that skit. So this was the second time Shawn helped me adapt something I'd written for my church to the screen. It's called Lucifer and the Father. And I play the devil. Bob from Reconciler, Bob, who played Detective Tilton, plays God. And originally it was going to be just us talking for 20 minutes. But Shawn, who loves the Oregon area, knew all these great locations that he could have God moving Satan around to. And this thing is intended to be, we want to turn my Genesis movie, as well as some other stories we have, into subsequent episodes. So we're trying to crowdsource that, whether it's through VidAngel, who does The Chosen, or on our own. And I'll let you take over here with some of the places people can do that, or how that came about.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, that's one project that I have going on with Scott, and kind of what we're concentrating on together on that. And it is true. There is, as a filmmaker, you're like, okay, two people talking at a table for 20 minutes, not too exciting. And I have a home over in Central Oregon, and we spent a lot of time there during the summers, especially. And so I thought, why not, take some of my favorite locations there and move the conversation around so it's more interesting. And then we also used the locations as illustrations as well. So when we're in the volcanic area of a volcanic flow, and it has a forest on both sides of it, it cuts through the forest. So we use that as an analogy of the how sin, when with the fall of man with Adam and Eve, how it cut the God's design original in half. And so we utilize this road that goes through, and we talk about how Jesus is the path that gets you across. And so it was it was fun to be able to do that. But if you know your Bible much, it's called the temptation of Jesus, where Satan basically takes Jesus around to these different locations, at the top of the temple, to out here, to over there. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if God was like, moving Satan around, and Satan's like, what? Upset about it. He goes, well, you did that to my son, And so, even Scott's character, I wrote in a line, it's like, oh, so this is revenge. And so it's kind of a fun, there's some play that goes on there. And my wife actually got involved in writing as well.
Right. Oh yeah, and you both did a great job.
Yeah, and she's worked with me on and off. She was my production designer on a couple of different film projects as well. I did another film called A Murder of Innocence that she was on. And so as far as that's what we're trying to develop this into a television series, or that's the idea right now. Scott's already kind of crafted scripts for 5 more episodes that we'll be rewriting and going through, and all of it's on my my site, justicepictures.com, and then there's a little tab on the upper right called In Development, and you can read a lot more about it there, and actually watch the Lucifer and the Father series. But as far as other, I'm working with a woman out of Virginia Beach area and Virginia, talking about her son died of a fentanyl overdose, and we're developing a script based on his life and what happened to him. And he was hurt really bad in high school, and got hooked on pain pills, and then struggled with that. But in the midst of that, his faith really helped him through it, and he got roped into working for the police as an informant, and anyway, it's an interesting story, and the governor is aware of it there, and so they're in the process of developing that and getting the funds together. So that's one project, and that's also actually on the In Development tab. But I have another partner that was he was the finance executive producer on Out of the Darkness, and he and I, wrapped up that project and didn't talk for a couple of years. And then I just called him out of the blue saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And we started writing. We have a samurai movie that we wrote together, and a couple of other projects that are kind of that's on my IMDb page, actually, on Kenzo. And there's a couple of others that he and I'm helping him with as well. So, in the meantime, still doing corporate work and instructional videos and promotional
sounds
videos.
like you're
and
keeping
such.
busy.
So you got to,
Yeah.
it's you got to put food on the table for the family, but always try and strive and utilize what you got to do narrative stuff too.
Great. So as we sort of wrap things up again, Shawn, you told us where we could find you. Tell us the name of your website again.
It's justicepictures.com. And again, there's a couple of tabs at the top. One is called In Development, and you can kind of look at the 2 or 3 projects. I have working with a guy and again in Virginia on a very interesting story on what happened just to some slaves right as World War II. The Civil War was just getting underway, and it kind of changed the course of the war for slaves to become soldiers in the North, Northern armies. And without getting into it, that's kind of a cool story, and we're developing that, working with a potential investor there on that too. So, and then on the other tabs, there's in production tab that kind of details some of the corporate work that we do. And anyway, and then the films tab actually has all the links to all the films that I've worked on and done. Great.
And Scott, where can people find you? You have it online anywhere?
Yes. Well, when I'm not doing projects like this, I am a full-time professional entertainer. The thing is, I don't really go on tour. I do most of my performing here in Boston, corporate events, kids parties, stuff like that. One group that I formed during the pandemic, the 2 great things that came out of the pandemic for me were Lucifer and the Father and a group called the Mario Players. Me and 4 other people, we each dressed up as a different character from Super Mario. And we had no idea the movie was going to come out and be as big as it was. And I play a Mario, and I do a very good job. And I do magic tricks as a Mario, and my best friend plays Luigi, and he's a singer. And the idea is that we're a variety group. Now, we don't travel much more than the Massachusetts area, but we have live streamed a lot of our shows on our Facebook page. So if you want to see yours truly as Mario with my friends, you can check out our Facebook page, The Mario Players. And if you want to learn about me as a magician, you can check out my Facebook page, The Great Scott, or greatscottmagician.com.
All right, great. And so I want to thank both of you for your time. Thanks a lot. It's been
and if you want to watch Lucifer and the Father, it's available on YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Oh, and so can I just say
one thing? Absolutely.
Can I just say one thing about Lucifer and the Father?
Yes.
The one thing that I can't get over about Lucifer and the Father is we get a couple people who will just jump on us for, oh, there's no way the devil and God look like me and Bob. And my response to that is, okay, God can't go into hell and Satan is banished from heaven. So the only way these 2 could come face to face is if they put on human disguises, if you will, and met on Earth. I thought people would figure that out on their own, but apparently you have to spell everything out for people. Yeah. So that was the mindset. But anyway, I just want to set the record straight on that.
All right, great.